So all trauma-informed rehabilitation techniques are reward-based, but not all reward-based techniques are trauma-informed. Let's imagine a dog that has been subjected to a negative experience, such as maybe being squirted with a lemon squeezer or approached by a stranger, or some kind of bad experience with a groomer or a vet or fireworks, something like that. You might decide to try and to desensitize them gradually to that situation. You would subject them to the object or the trigger, whatever that was, whether that was the person approaching or the noise. You would try to dilute that, so make it as non-frightening as possible. And then you would pair that experience with something rewarding, like a clicker, a toy, or a treat. You might add a new cue to help your dog to do something that's going to get them a reward. You might use encouragement. So you might ask them to sit next to the item or use food as a lure. Lots of different options to try and help your dog desensitize themselves to something that scared them in the past. If there is no trauma present, the dog will, over time, start to associate this experience, this diluted version of the experience, with a happy outcome. And they will then start to look forward to that instead of fearing it like they used to. And then you can gradually remove the dilution. So, for example, if it was fireworks, you would reduce the sound of the fireworks to the absolute minimum. Start there. Maybe give your dog a task to do, something they're good at. You might ask them to sit. You might ask them to play. You might bring in some treats and things like that, make some games up. And then once they can cope really well with that, that very, very low diluted level, you would slowly increase the volume. If it's an object, then you might start far away. And when they can cope with that very well, then you would decrease the distance. So you would dilute the experience, give them a good experience at that low level, and then build that back up again. But if trauma is present, then the dog is not able to respond in the same way. Trauma is like a toughened protective shield. It protects the dog from harm by prioritizing survival mechanisms such as emotional and physical safety. So the dog's thought process is not the same for a dog that has suffered trauma than it would be for a dog that has just suffered a fright. So when they're in this kind of state, it means their adrenaline levels are really high. This can cause the dog to be more reactive, and it can activate a fear or aggressive response far more quickly. So for you, this might be like walking home in the dark. You're on your own. Every kind of noise, every time of movement will trigger you. You're alert to everything. And this is kind of what it's like to have trauma, but it's like that all the time. So we're not really considering in that state of mind what's going on around us. We're not going, oh, that noise, that was just a bird in the bush, like we would do during the day, in the afternoon when it's brightly lit, sunshine, warmth. At night time, we don't consider that. We're in a survival mode. So therefore, we see every noise and every bit of movement as something that could threaten our survival. So we can see that almost anything can trigger a fear response, any sound, a flash of movement. So new anxieties are very, very easily created for your dog when they are in a state of trauma. It affects all their thinking. Dogs socialize well. They can often develop attachment problems. Curiosity is pushed aside. There's no time for that. When safety is at stake, think about yourself in the middle of the night. You're not being curious about that sound. You're trying to get away from it because you are worried about it. It has triggered an emotional response that makes you afraid. So your motivation for learning and reward seeking is also affected, which means that there's no treats, you're not desiring treats, you don't want to play, praise means less. So when you lack motivation and confidence and curiosity and rewards stop working, you can see how this makes recovery from behavior problems very, very hard. So what happens to this dog, using the same desensitization technique that we were talking about above, is that all they do is begin to associate the treat or the clicker or the new cue or the place or the person with that bad thing. And then that just becomes a predictor of the bad thing. And then eventually it becomes a bad thing in itself. So this means the dog will become averse to the clicker or sounds like it. They might become averse to treats, to the toy that you use, to that specific cue or that space, whatever else you might be using at that time. So this could mean then that if you ask your dog to sit, Actually, what it does is it triggers that fear response that they already had associated with the trigger that you were trying to work on. So this means that not only will the training not work for you, but even worse than that, it means that you now can't use these techniques for anything else without solving these new anxieties first. Imagine trying to rehabilitate a dog that is also afraid of a clicker or a treat or toys or being asked to sit. Almost all rehabilitation plans use at least one of these options, so your options now become exceptionally limited. So now you have to make an entirely new plan, or you have 5 other problems to solve instead of just the original one. Rescue dogs might come with trauma. Rolo, a dog I worked with a while back, had an aversion to the clicker and associated it with bad things before he came to live with his new people. When I was working with him, he accepted the introductory phase outside, but ran away when he saw it in the house. He was afraid of new people, so presumably it had been used as part of a training plan in a previous home while still under the influence of that trauma. So if you check for trauma first, you can adjust the techniques and the plan that you're using and then not risk making any further problems or further traumatizing your dog. So how do you do that? Well, I could write a whole book on that. But check out my other trauma videos for more information about trauma, including some things that you can do that will reduce trauma, games that you can play and things like that. They will teach you also how to identify it and some ideas about how you might start solving it. But if you need help, get a trauma-informed behaviourist to help you navigate your dog's anxieties without risking further damage. I cannot stress that enough. The risk of adding more problems is high with a dog that has trauma just because they live in survival mode all the time, even if it doesn't look like it. Hopefully that's given you some food for thought. I'd love to know your comments. Drop them in the comments box underneath, and I'll see you again soon. Take care for now. Bye-bye.